District, which is in Northeast Philadelphia. A little bit about Rep. Dawkins. In his time in the House of Representatives, he served as Majority Chairman of the Labor and Industry Committee, and also serves on the Democratic Policy Committee, and is a member of the Legislative Black Caucus and Philadelphia House Delegation. And Ryan is Executive Director for the Labor and Industry Committee and has joined us today to talk about Rep. Dawkins' efforts around raising the minimum wage in PA. So, Ryan, thanks very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It is great to be here and talk about this important issue. So Chairman Dawkins has been the chairman of Labor and Industry Committee now. This is his second session. A little bit, we are a partisan legislature, so I work for the Democrats, and the Democrats took the majority back now 2 sessions ago. So this is our second session sort of in control. And as you all know, the minimum wage in Pennsylvania has not been raised for nearly 2 decades. It's been at $7.25 an hour since the federal government actually raised the federal minimum wage, which caused us to kind of get bumped up then when that was raised. However, lay of the land, all of our surrounding states have a higher minimum wage than Pennsylvania. Most of them are at $15 an hour. Some of them are actually increasing beyond that. Even West Virginia, I believe, is higher at $8.75 an hour, and Ohio is at $11 an hour, I believe. So, with our sort of, a lot of the arguments about raising minimum wage, right, center around that people will lose jobs, move across state lines. But when all of our surrounding states have a higher minimum wage than we do, we know that that's not an issue. So to get into the legislation a bit, House Bill 1549, which is Chairman Dawkins's bill that passed the House last year, would raise the minimum wage in a bit of a different way than has been done typically in the past. This would take a more regional approach to set wages because the cost of living, of course, across the state is not the same. We also want to get the minimum wage raised. And so the bill that we passed last session didn't really go anywhere in the Senate. And so we thought we would try something different that spoke to sort of the difference in cost of living across the state. So it does it in a regional approach. As I said, it passed the House. Let's pull up the history here. So it passed the House last June by a vote of 102 to 101. So that was a party line vote, I believe, in which all Democrats voted in favor and all Republicans opposed the bill. It was referred to the Senate Labor and Industry Committee on June 18th of last year, where it has sat without action. Governor Shapiro, I believe, in every budget address that he has made since being governor, including this year, has called for raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. He just wants to do it right away, as his budget sort of plan suggests. But these would take a phased-in approach where gradually over time, the minimum wage would be increased to allow employers the time to, frankly, build that into their budgets and their financial aspects. So that is House Bill 1549. Because it's timely, I'll also talk about House Bill 2189, which is Chairman Dawkins' other minimum wage bill. As I said, 1549 sort of went over there and sat in the Senate as well. So we thought, we'd send them another bill. So this bill has passed. At this point, it has passed the House on second consideration, passed out of committee, and is now in the Appropriations Committee, and could be voted on final passage as soon as next Monday, the 23rd. This bill is more similar to House Bill 1500 from last session. It raises the minimum wage statewide at the same level, first to $13 or 11, 13, and then finally 15. And then the year after it would be raised to 15, it would be indexed to inflation so that it would continue to rise with the cost of living, so that we're not, in another 20 years here talking about, raising the minimum wage again. So as I said, that bill is expected to receive a vote potentially as early as Monday, March 23rd. Let's see if I can pull up. I have a couple of facts around, just each year, the Department of Labor and Industry in Pennsylvania releases a fact sheet around the minimum wage in Pennsylvania, and talks about sort of who makes the minimum wage, where they're, the industries that they're concentrated in, how many individuals would receive a raise. Um, and, thankfully, over the years of doing sort of advocacy and working in this space, the number of individuals who would receive a raise has gone down as, frankly, the cost of living has increased. Employers have frankly had to raise their wages in order to find and attract and maintain employees. So less people now would receive a raise. I think when I first started around, it was nearly a million people or something would have gotten a raise. It was increased to $15 an hour. But women are disproportionately represented in this group. Hospitality and other industries like that. The typical minimum wage jobs you may think of. So um, that's generally, I think, a lay of the land. Some information about the legislation. I'm more than happy to answer questions about the bill or advocacy or lobbying or anything like that from a sort of staffer's perspective.
Uh, Unless we have any questions that pop up in the chat, or if anyone wants to chime in, I would love to hear your perspective of, what advice you might have to share with some of these groups who are coming next Tuesday for LEAD. It may be their first time visiting and doing advocacy in person in Harrisburg. So, I think we've done a training, from our perspective of, how to be a good advocate, how to prepare yourself. But I would love to hear a staffer's kind of perspective on what it feels like to be on the other end of the table for these meetings.
Absolutely. So, something that I think is really important to note is that, a lot of times staff talks to individuals who are being paid to talk to us, whether it's other agency staff or, lobbyists. And so having folks come who are social workers, social work students, everyday professionals who this is not their line of work, I think is really impactful because you hear about the experiences that people have on the ground. In ways being in the Capitol can be a bit of a bubble, even though we work on issues across the spectrum and think we're sort of experts on these things. But hearing from the people on the ground is really important. And, it takes on a different vibe and tone than if someone is a paid lobbyist who you may know and have that relationship with. So the sort of advice that I have is to really, take the time to share your story about why you're there, why the issues are important to you, and how it impacts either you or your loved ones or your community personally. I think we hear a lot about dollars and cents and, this statistic and that, but sometimes I think the human element, and I'm sure social workers can appreciate that as well, it can be missing in some of those conversations. So I really like to think of like, I think folks can be nervous when they're going in to speak with either legislators or staff, but I certainly understand that. But my advice is, try your best not to be, because ultimately you're the expert on the issue that you're there to discuss, because it's your lived experience as someone engaged in this profession or a student. And, that is really valuable information. You have information that no one in the Capitol building has because you're on the ground out there, doing this work. So, share your personal stories. Try not to be too nervous, and uh, you know, I'm sure you've covered all of the basics in terms of how to conduct a meeting. But from my perspective, just hearing the personal stories and engaging, and being able to ask questions, from my perspective, is really helpful because. I think sometimes as staff, we're trying to sort of like suss out what's the ask, what do they want from us or the members, to how to move things along. Um, and I think tailoring the questioning to getting around like the important sort of like what's the problem, and what's the solution, and how can the legislators help to fix it, because most of the time they want to do something about the problems they hear about. And so having folks who are ready to do that is really important.
Thank you for that. Any questions from anyone? I'm not sure that if we don't have any more questions, Ryan, is there anything else that you want to share about the chairman's efforts around this, or any way to kind of tailor our message? If we're meeting with senators, kind of the push to be move the bill that's in the Senate, if we're meeting with House members, or maybe keeping the message more general, just focus on pass legislation to raise the minimum wage.
I mean, I think that's helpful. Some of the sort of pushback that opponents to the legislation you may hear are that number one, that no one pays 7.25 an hour anymore. As I alluded to before, the market has sort of changed. Um, but You'll also may hear that businesses will be forced to eliminate jobs, especially jobs potentially for children or young workers. In my mind, I don't know how both of those things can be true. That if no one's paying 7.25, they're already paying $15 an hour. I don't see how their costs will increase if it increases. But so that's some of the sort of pushback you might hear. But even $15 an hour is about $30,000 a year. And, we all know how expensive it is to live, rent, mortgages, food, gas, all of these things. And $30,000 a year for an individual is not very much, even at $15 an hour. And we can pay people, more than half as less as that, at 7.25 an hour, which, was poverty wages for people with family. And so, the time, as Chairman Dawkins is also like, the time is well overdue. We've been having this conversation now. A bill almost passed the legislature. I think it was back in 2018 at this point. I can't remember the time. I think it was around $8 or $9 an hour. The minimum wage would have been increased to, and even that couldn't get across the finish line. So, but this is also an issue that cuts across. If you look at states, particularly states that have ballot measures, even Republican states, right? This is thought of as typically a Democratic issue, but Republican states, Ohio, right? Also, they raise the minimum wage by ballot measure because people understand you can't survive on 7.25, right? It's just impossible. So, thank you all for the work you're doing and for coming out and talking about this important issue that Chairman Dawkins has been and the caucus, right? Frankly, has been behind. And I think if this new bill gets a vote, this will be the third time the House will have passed a minimum wage increase since they took a majority. So yeah, we just need to get over the finish line over in the Senate, and hopefully with all of your advocacy, it will definitely help.
Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you sharing kind of that historical perspective and kind of going in depth on the need. I think that's the sort of stuff that bolsters the confidence of our attendees to feel prepared to have these discussions. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to join.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Angie. And for those of you that are coming and joining us next week, we'll be sending out an email to the schools within the next day or two, probably by the end of tomorrow at the latest, with more information about what to expect the day of, where your meetings are scheduled, what time, those types of things. So be on the lookout for that. Like I said, all these videos will be on our YouTube page. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out. But other than that, have a good rest of your day, everyone.